Simply put, the caliber of American-made products is of the best and most renowned in the entire world. The commitment to fair labor practices, exacting machining standards, and a penchant for personal product support speak to the dedication of said manufacturers to craft their gear with a keen focus on quality over quantity, rather than relying on cheaper, faster, and outsourced international labor to do so. We could wax and wane a lot longer, speaking to the dozens of reasons as to why it's crucial to consider and support American craftsmen in this hands-on guide of the best American-made pocket knives, but our video would easily inflate to 3 times its normal length. So instead, let's jump right in with our first pick and we'll unpack our rationale as we work through our top American-made pocket knife picks. Let's kick off the guide with Buck and the 112 Ranger. Buck, whose roots in the States date back to Kansas circa 1902. Now yes, the Buck 110 specifically is one of the knife maker's most prototypical models, much older than the almost identical albeit smaller 112, introducing a lockback model to the catalog back in the early 60s. But today we're looking at the 112 Ranger as a slightly smaller but equally capable pocket knife first introduced in 1972 and named after the aircraft carrier of the same name, the USS Ranger. Essentially, you can boil down the difference this way. If you find the 112 too small, go with the 110. If you end up finding the classic 110 too large, go with the 112. They are both made from 420HC steel, ebony, and brass with nearly identical builds, and both come with a classic handle shape or a handle featuring finger grooves. Much like case strappers, Buck folders are notoriously coveted and collected as they've been constructed from high-end materials and American craftsmanship since day one, and have actual use case with hunters and outdoorsmen who love the sturdy lockback system's portability as an equally dependable alternative to carrying around non-folding fixed blades. This particular Buck 112 Ranger is our pick for the best vintage-styled American-made knife. Constructed from Crelicam ebony handles, beautiful one-piece brass bolsters that run behind the wooden inserts, and a 420HC clip-point blade. Overall dimensions measure up to 4¼ inches when closed and opens to a 3-inch even blade that maintains a highly versatile blade thickness of 0.12 inches. Because of its material construction, the 112, much like the larger 110, is not the most lightweight EDC pocket knife. The brass bolsters and hardwood inlays, as well as the metal handle pins and metal locking assembly inside, all contribute to the overall 5.6 ounce total weight. And for context, the 110 clocks in a little over 7 ounces. By the way, this 3-line logo stamp on the blade is a way to narrow down the approximate date of your buck, should you not choose to pick up a brand new knife and instead look to source something older or second hand. Originally, the mid-60s 110s specifically, as they're much older than the 70s era 112s, used a 1-line horizontal buck blade stamp originally, then came the 1-line inverted, the 2-line that saw the addition of a USA marker under buck, and eventually that gave way to different variations of the 3-line stamp we see now. The latest of which is what you see here. Buck, the model number, in our case 112, then USA stacked one on top of each other in that order. As well built and iconic as Buck folders remain, the lack of a pocket clip might dissuade you from carrying it around on the day-to-day if you prefer or are used to carrying a knife in your pocket via a clip, so keep that in mind. From the Golden, Colorado-based outfit Spyderco, the Paramilitary 2 is our pick for the best American-made tactically inspired defense knife, and our qualifier aside, it's one of the most popular EDC knives in existence, period. Spyderco doesn't manufacture all their knives stateside. In fact, a significant portion of their manufacturing happens offshore in locales like Japan, Taiwan, Italy, and China, but to their credit, they've invested heavily in domestic manufacturing over the past decade. They now offer dozens of pocket knives machined by American tradesmen and women, and are expanding the breadth of this offering each and every year. Be that as it may, even with their newer American-made releases, we remain fans of the older, circa 2010 paramilitary silhouette, and can't recommend it enough as its build, overall design, and function have stood the test of time even considering new knife-making advances. The Paramilitary 2, or PM2 for short, is certainly not a knife that everyone would deem approachable for EDC. First, it's a bigger knife, an overall length of 8.26 inches, a handle length of 4.82 inches, and a blade length of 3.45 inches are slightly larger dimensions than the average build. But it's certainly not unpocketable by any means, although it does tend to sit better in a utility pant pocket than your average pair of slacks. Second, the overall design is certainly tactical. It just looks like a knife that's wholly mission capable, so to speak, and that look won't be for everyone. Though the rugged build quality is a testament to the operation that Spyderco set up stateside. Their compression lock system was an innovation by Spyderco co-founder Sal Glesser circa 2000, and it's what we have built into the PM2. Essentially, you have a leaf spring extending from a liner that wedges between the blade and the stop pin, resulting in a seriously strong joint and zero blade play. You also get a view here from the top, and it almost looks to the eye like a short topside liner lock, so to speak. The position also allows you to deploy the blade like this with a simple wrist action, or you can use Spyderco's signature thumb hole in the blade itself to deploy with a quick flick of a finger. This blacked out PM2 provides G10 scales, American-made CPM S45VN blade steel, a highly repositionable deep carry pocket clip, and this one uses a full black and charcoal gray wash by way of a matted DLC or diamond-like carbon coating. And as cool as we think the tip-to-toe blacked out build is, should you want a different look, there are other PM2 combos from Spyderco and a healthy PM2 aftermarket for scales and other components. Speaking of aftermarket components, our next pick is our best customizable American-made knife pick, the notorious Benchmade Bugout, hailing from Oregon City, USA. Unlike Spyderco, Benchmade sets itself apart with a catalog comprised of all American-made knives, machined that way since the early 1980s. Although the Bugout itself has a comparatively short lifespan, first released in 2017, it's become one of Benchmade's best-selling models, and one of the most popular, lightweight, and highly customizable EDC knives with an unprecedented amount of aftermarket support. The Bugout is most well known for its use of featherweight gravery scales, essentially an incredibly strong for its weight class thermoplastic, and these handle scales are usually what most folks look to customize first. But even before you search around for aftermarket options, look directly to Benchmade themselves to find the exact color or color combination you're looking for, since they offer the Bugout with scales in all kinds of shades. And if you don't find a combination that you like, you can create your own Bugout with Benchmade's custom knife tool that allows for changes in handle material, handle color, liner color, blade finish, blade engraving, and custom colored hardware like the thumb lugs, spacers, screws, and more. And for even more unique options, we'd highly suggest checking out suppliers like Flytanium, who even make custom metal scales for the Bugout and Bugout Mini, and everything from carbon fiber to brass and copper to titanium and more, along with a laundry list of different options for custom hardware. Now about the Bugout itself. Similar to Spyderco with the advancement of the compression lock, Benchmade has championed the axis lock. Now, you can't technically credit them for the invention. That honor goes to the knife makers Bill McHenry and Jason Williams back in 1988. But shortly after its introduction, Benchmade bought the patent and began to integrate the locking system into a substantial amount of their knives. This patent has since expired shortly before the Bugout's release in 2017, and now any knife maker can technically use the lock in their own designs. But obviously, they can't brand the design as an axis lock, as the IP is still owned by Benchmade. The Bugout was initially aimed at the outdoor space, but quite rapidly caught on in the EDC space because of its lightweight but high-strength build. The axis system, a lightweight system itself, combined with the featherweight gravery scales and relatively thin overall blade thickness, allows the Bugout to stay at just 1.5 ounces in total weight, about the weight of your standard No. 2 wooden pencil. This specifically is the 535-12 Bugout with tan gravery scales, black oxide finish hardware, gold anodized thumb studs and backspacers, and a 3.2-inch CPM S30V uncoated drawpoint blade. When closed, it's roughly 4.2 inches in length with an overall length with the blade deployed just under 7.5 inches. Yes, it's not always the case that purchasing American-made products means better customer support, but generally, a huge benefit of doing so is the ease of said support if something goes wrong with your knife. Benchmade has a program named LifeSharp. With the purchase of any Benchmade knife, Bugout included, you'll also receive free cleaning, oiling, sharpening, and adjustments for life. Like Spyderco and unlike Benchmade this time, Kershaw uses a considerable amount of overseas manufacturing and assembly, but they do have a core family of American-made pocket knives. Our next pick, our selection for one of the best American-made automatic EDC pocket knives, is the Kershaw Launch 18. Now, before we get berated in the comments, we're not suggesting this is the best automatic OTF. That would be a different conversation. Our focus with this pick is highlighting one of the best automatic knives that are not OTFs, just to make our intent very clear. Anyway, the Kershaw Launch 18, a new release compared to our previous picks introduced by Kershaw last year in 2023. A few things right out of the gate. At first glance, it's a beautifully designed knife, specs aside. The gray anodized aluminum build is angular, it's tapered, and beautifully chamfered, and in our opinion, complements the size and shape of the spear point blade very attractively. We likewise love the design and layout of the push-button deployant and pivot collar, and are equally fond of the shape and finish of the oblong pocket clip. And just for context, the Launch 18 is only the latest in the American-made automatic Launch family. The Launch 1 began the family in 2015, and it remains one of Kershaw's best sellers. For those residing in a locale that maintains a blade restriction for automatic knives, whether those be OTFs or out the sides, look to the Launch 4, whose sub 2-inch blade checks the box for anyone living in a state like ours, California. The dark gray anodized 6061 aluminum handles go a long way to allow the 6.79-inch Launch 18 to stay at just 2.3 ounces. For a current sticker tag well under $200, you're also provided with an integrated backspacer and a ceramic bead-blasted titanium pivot trim ring. The Launch 18 uses this button here above the ring to deploy the blade, and does so with a super snappy, fast action. American-made CPM 154 blade steel, as you can see from the blade stamp at the base. CPM 154 will sharpen up beautifully, by the way, with impressively high marks across every blade steel metric with particularly excellent toughness and corrosion resistance, and it measures up at about 58 to 60 on the Rockwell scale. The Launch 18 has excellent proportions and balance in hand. Overall, it's not all that long at 6.79 inches, with the sub 3-inch 2.79-inch blade deployed, and employs an even 4-inch handle. Minimal but adequate jimping on the spine, a repositionable pocket clip, and only one notch for an index grip under the main hardware. We had no intention of having this be a survey of original locking mechanisms, yet here we are again, with our pick for the best American-made workhorse knife, the Microtech standard issue MSI that builds an MT zone RAM-LOK crossbar design. We guess this even further backs up our stance on American-made products. Now, one thing from the get-go, as there can be some confusion, especially speaking about Benchmade just a few moments ago. Microtech's RAM-LOK is not an Axis-style lock. If it's going to be referred to as anything specific, we'd say an apt classification would be a bar lock style lock, and it uses an ambidextrous version of Microtech's X button slider on both sides of the knife for deployment, which is all to say the mechanism is different from anything out there at the moment. Currently priced under $200, the MSI, short for Microtech standard issue by the way, is an insane value considering Microtech prices most all their other knives well above $200. Keep in mind the insane value here, as Microtech makes every single component, and we're talking down to the tiniest pieces of hardware, entirely in-house in North Carolina, with a design by way of Microtech founder Tony Marfione, who started the company back in 1994. The MSI measures 8.94 inches from tip to toe, with the 3.88-inch blade deployed, and a 5.06-inch handle made of black injection molded polymer. As you can probably tell from the dimensions and the presence in hand, the MSI is an extremely beefy, robust pocket knife. M390MK for the partially serrated modified sheep's foot blade, which features a notably long blade cutout and a rugged stonewash finish. This build quality makes it possible to deploy the blade with the flick of a finger, a smooth sweep of a thumb, or a quick flip of the wrist with the locking mechanism retracted. And we say that even though the MSI does speak a language of its own, you can see a bit of the Bugout's DNA in terms of how the locking system renders the whole profile. That being said, comparatively, the MSI dwarfs the full-size Bugout and weighs about 3.5 times more as well at 4.52 ounces. Length and width aside, the MSI and Bugout are relatively thin for their strength at 0.54 inches and 0.4 inches respectively. Slip joint knives are some of the oldest pocket knife constructions. By most accounts, historians date them back to around the 1600s, but in all honesty, they're probably much older than that, if you can allow us to very loosely classify a slip joint knife as a folding knife without any robust locking system. Modern slip joints usually use a simple spring or a detent or two to hold the blade open, or a combination of the two, but it's by no means a locking system. With enough force, and it's usually quite a low amount of force, a slip joint's blade will most definitely snap shut on your fingers if you're not careful. These springs or detents also help keep the blade closed in the pocket, by the way. Anyway, one of our favorite American-made slip joints is the Zero Tolerance 0235, a design by Danish knife maker and co-founder of the knife-making operation Giant Mouse, Jens Ansu. Just to be clear, this is a collaboration between the designer and Zero Tolerance, not Giant Mouse. But we mentioned the California-based venture, who also includes Danish knife maker Jesper Voxnes and co-founder Jim Worth, just to provide some more context and lend more credibility. The 0235 is the follow-up to the capable 0230, mainly updating the blade shape. The 0235 now uses a spear point blade shape instead of the previous sheep's foot, but machines it from the same American-made CPM 20CV steel and uses the same eye-catching blue backspacer. An overall length of 6.3 inches, a closed length of 3.8, and a 2.6-inch blade with a nail nick just under the spine about halfway down for deployment. As the handles themselves are made from carbon fiber, this full-size knife is ridiculously lightweight at 1.8 ounces, just a 0.3 ounce difference than the marginally lighter Bugout, even though it's slightly shorter in overall length. You'll find a blue anodized aluminum backspacer with an integrated lanyard loop at the base of the handle, as well as a small black pocket clip for keeping the 0235 on your person one way or another. Technically, Zero Tolerance does classify the pocket clip here as extra deep carry, but we think that's perhaps a bit of a stretch. Another major benefit of purchasing an American-made knife is the high caliber of the manufacturer's quality control. Of course, there are exceptions, as there are for everything, but generally speaking, making knives stateside, employing tradesmen, sourcing materials, and running facilities in America is far more costly than outsourcing all of the above. So this means that an American knife maker is generally more focused on ensuring a smaller but higher quality batch of knives ship out to the customers. Rick Hinderer and a small team out of Shreve, Ohio personally machine the pocket knives sold under the Rick Hinderer Knives moniker. And our next pick we have here as our best small batch American made knife is the Rick Hinderer XM18. Simply put, small batch means attention to detail, attention to each and every detail, with the utmost care, and that, in our opinion, definitely shines through with the XM18. Look at the machining close-up in detail with us for just a moment. Take, for example, the clearance between the thumb stud and the handle when it deploys. The tolerances here are so incredibly thin. We could have also just as easily classified the XM18 as a great workhorse American-made knife by swapping it for the MSI, as its build is ultra sturdy and it's by no means a small folder at 8.25 inches in total length, with a 3.5 inch spear point blade and a 5.6 ounce total weight. And we say sturdy specifically because there's a bit of intention behind such tight tolerances between the thumb studs and the handle scales. Hinderer designed the XM18 with the idea that the thumb studs abutting the handles would actually provide lateral or side-to-side blade stability and support under extreme forces. They simply did this by sliding the thumb stud assembly a lot closer to the handle than you'd typically find on any other folder. Rick Hinderer and team released all their folders like the XM18 in small batches. The XM18 specifically offered with a wide variety of handle materials and blade steel combinations. Ours here has one side in a highly textured wave-like black G10 handle scale secured onto a steel liner, and on the other side a solid steel that builds in an actual frame lock, which by the way feels incredibly solid with an aggressive angle by way of a wide lock bar cut out toward the base of the handle. You'll also notice the abundance of jimping on the blade spine, both sides of the handle spines, and more on the underside of the handle toward the end of the knife as well. The machine channels are deep and fairly aggressive, we noticed, and when using the flip tab to deploy the blade, the tip of your index finger can start to get a bit chewed up by the sharpness of the jimping, but that was only a minor observation. The jimping is highly effective, it's just not the most comfortable deploying experience. Last but by no means least, Hinderer builds in a substantial and attractively designed deep carry pocket clip on the side of the frame lock that features a hollow center and a rounded base, one that comes natively in a tip-down style to keep the XM18 conveniently on your person. We're ending this guide with a verifiable American-made pocket knife icon, the Reeve Sebenza. No American-made pocket knife guide would be complete without making mention of the knife maker or this specific model in his catalog. We'd go so far as to say it is the knife most other pocket knives get compared to, even so many years later since the original's release in the mid-90s. In layman's, it's the pocket knife that paved the way in form and function for a laundry list of modern knife makers. The Sebenza, since its very first iteration, has gone through many forms. We've chosen today to focus on a Sebenza called the 31 that was released in 2019, replacing the Sebenza 21, and is a folder still offered by the Boise-based knife maker to this day, and one that carries a hefty price tag north of $400. The Sebenza 31's clean, simple design is now not all that uncommon in the EDC knife space, but this wasn't always the case. Now, they are not the only, but they were one of the first, and this fully deserves the admiration the brand continues to receive. Plus, they've continued to update the Sebenza with modern material advancements, proving old dogs can indeed learn new tricks. This small size Sebenza 31, and it comes in a large size as well, uses CPM MagnaCut Super Steel for the 3.61 inch drop point blade, depending on availability, or S45VN. The 4.79 inch handle is also made from 6AL4V sandblasted titanium, allowing the 31's total 8.4 inch profile to stay under 5 ounces in total weight at 4.7. Another major talking point, perhaps the biggest talking point when discussing the Sebenza, is the Reeve integral lock. This model upgraded with a ceramic ball interface that maintains an HRC of 97, essentially fancy for a ceramic detent. Reeve is credited with the invention of the frame lock, a system that bypasses the liner in a liner lock setup and instead uses a portion of the handle itself to stop or lock the travel of the blade tang. It's incredibly simple and incredibly sturdy. Now, for those who aren't already clued in, the Reeve team, like many of our other American-made picks, is a small operation. Combined with the reputation of the Sebenza itself, getting your hands on a Sebenza 31 or any Sebenza is currently a 4-year wait. So that begs the question, after all these years, is the Sebenza worth it? In our opinion, yes. You're getting an iconic piece of American craftsmanship and knife-making history, considering Chris Reeve's legacy with the advent of the frame-LOK. It's attractive, it's well-machined, it uses extremely high-grade materials and one of the latest advancements in American super steels, and is backed by the Chris Reeve team's top-tier customer service for any issues or regular maintenance. A heartfelt thank you for sticking with us to the end of our guide highlighting the very best in American knife making. There are certainly other American manufacturers we didn't have the time to include today, so if we missed any of your favorites, feel free to drop us a line below as we always love to hear from you. Also be sure to check out our editorial guide for even more great coverage, and we'll catch you next time.